what are all the elements of self-care? Like you kind of mentioned a few of them. It's not just exercise more. There's a lot more to it. So let's dive into some of that.
We're going to dive into that. And I will just give a shout out first before I dive into the ones that I'm going to look at today. We just have a short time period together today, so we're not really diving deep. There's a lot of resources out there about all of these, as well as more. One of my favorite resources and speakers is Olga Phoenix. And her website, which is olgaphoenix.com, has information, including a self-care wheel and resiliency wheel that I think are just really beautiful visual representations of many, many different components of self-care and many, many different points and elements of resiliency that are important for us. And so those would be some resources that if you want to look more into some of these elements, that I would highly suggest that you check out her resources. So again, that's Olga, O-L-G-A, Phoenix, Phoenix.com. And she has a free starter kit and free access to those PDFs on her website. I've chosen today to focus on 4 of these different elements that I have found to be really helpful, that in presenting about this for the last long period of time with people all over the world, that seem to resonate the most for people. And so I'm going to come back here and pull up this slideshow again for y'all.
All right, let me share some of your slides. Hey, there they are.
There we go. And we'll pull that up. And so we're going to start with the physical practices. And what we know is that the first 2 that I'm going to address, these first 2 elements, the physical practices and the mindfulness practices, are really the 2 most important that are directly related to how we perceive stress. And that's an important point because especially in a time like this, we can't change a lot of the stressors that we're dealing with. They just are. What we can change is how we perceive and respond to those stressors. And the physical practices and the mindfulness practices that we're going to look at are 2 of the main ways that we can really change how we perceive stress in our lives. Starting with the physical, and those of you who are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we need to address the physical first. And we are in a lot of ways right now. We're practicing physical distancing. You mentioned, Ryan, that you had someone on this morning talking about working from home. And I heard a wonderful quote on Twitter, actually, that said, we're not working from home. For many of us that don't usually work at home, some of you might be, but for most of us, we're not working from home. We're at home during a crisis, trying to work and trying to live and trying to manage our lives. And so these physical pieces are really important because if we don't address these, we can't address anything else. The other piece in that, as we focus on this kind of baseline physical need we have, is to let go of some of that need to be productive all the time, to understand that right now in the middle of a crisis, we need to start from our foundation, start from the physical practices. And I've listed just a few that are important and that you can integrate. The first that I added is breath work. And wherever you're at right now, if you want to pause and just take a nice deep inhale through your nose, if that's possible for you. And then sigh it out. We know that taking 6 deep breaths will actually significantly lower our blood pressure and our pulse rate. And so this is a huge one that we can all incorporate, whether those are, really focusing on the deep inhales, the long exhales, the sighing out. If you have young children, pretending that you have a cup of hot cocoa, taking a deep inhale, and then blowing on that hot cocoa. And you can do that with a flower or a candle or any other imagery that's helpful. We know that those deep breaths are really important for us at every age and can actually statistically significantly help to lower some of those physical responses that we have to uncertainty and anxiety in our lives. Sleep is huge. There's a lot of documented studies on the importance of sleep. You mentioned that my husband's watching today. He can tell you all about this one. This is a favorite for him to talk about. And particularly during this time when many of our routines have been interrupted, creating a routine still in our sleep patterns and our day patterns is important. And so I'm still going to bed and waking up at approximately the same times as I did when I was working outside the home. The same is true for how we eat, making sure that we still have regular meals and healthy snacks and options for that we're still hydrating, that we're still getting enough water. Go Hawks. Had to throw that one in there. And then, of course, getting those endorphins from exercising, stretching, whatever fits into your life. When I've presented on this in the past, I'm someone who's had a lot of commuting to do. And so finding ways to incorporate stretching at stoplights has been important. Now we could do an entire session just on options for how to do some stretching from your desk. And that's huge if you're working from home. That's really important if you're not getting as much exercise as you normally do, to find ways to do that. I will also add, though, that sometimes for me, practicing self-care means doing the exercise. For me, means doing my yoga or my Pilates, getting out and walking. And then there are other times that self-care actually means not doing those things. And that's where this mindfulness piece comes in. And mindfulness is really just the practice of being grounded in and mindful of this present moment, without judgment, without attachment. I'm just noticing. And that self-awareness is really critical right now. I can tell you some of the ways that I'm responding to the changes with COVID-19. And I can also tell you some of the ways that my husband is responding, and he could probably tell you mine too. The most important part of that, though, is we're aware of this ourselves, and we're also able to communicate that. And so for those of you with children at home too, encouraging them to notice how they're responding to this, being aware of that, being able to communicate and talk about that without that judgment piece is important. Some other ways that we can practice mindfulness practices, meditation practices, prayer can fall in that category. Self-compassion is huge for whatever you're experiencing right now. And I'll often use the prompt of, what would you say to yourself if you were your best friend? Or in my case, if I was talking to my sisters, if they were feeling like I'm feeling in this moment, what would I say to them? We often tend to talk to ourselves. Our self-talk tends to be like we're our own worst critics, worst enemies, rather than really treating ourselves with compassion as we would a friend. Nature can be really important even right now. And so getting out to take a walk if you can, obviously following the physical distancing criteria, even little things like I have at my desk a little plant that I keep on here just so I have a little bit of green always when I'm working. Having some vitamin D, having some lights. If you're someone who works with some of those lights, we need nature and we need sunlight, and that is real and important. And you'd mentioned, Ryan, in your promos for this, talking about positivity. And I think it's really important to note that when we talk about positivity, we're not trying to pretend that it's not hard right now and it's not challenging. It's really important with this mindfulness piece of noticing that, of really being honest with ourselves and others about the tough stuff too. And I love the and still knowing that what we water grows. And so if we focus on the challenges, if we focus on the negatives, they will grow. If we, got together for a Zoom fest and we just all whined and complained and talked about the hard stuff, you can just feel how that would feel. We need to talk about that. Absolutely. We need to explore that. And we also need to focus on some of the positives. And we know that focusing on the positive can have some really very real researched responses in our bodies. Smiling can improve our recovery time from stress and even improve our immune system. The same is true for laughter. And one of the great things with laughter is that it doesn't have to be real for it to have positive effects on us. And so I have a colleague who's a laughter yoga teacher, and we'll practice laughing together. And one of the great things, first of all, is when you start laughing, other people start laughing with you, and it tends to be contagious. And then also, again, has these really very positive effects on our brain chemistry, on our immune system, on our body that are really important right now. And then finally on here is the gratitude piece. And again, gratitude has a lot of researched benefits, from improvement in our sleep and immune system, our energy level, our resiliency, which is incredibly important right now, as well as our compassion for ourselves, for others, our feelings of contentment, our ability to relax. And so gratitude is something that we can practice in a lot of different ways, from even just taking a moment to verbalize it, from keeping a gratitude journal where you write down a few things every day, sending thank you notes, sending thank you emails, whatever works for you, taking the time to focus on the gratitude. Again, acknowledging there's tough stuff happening, and where we focus our attention is really important. And then the last two that I wanted to mention that I find are really important, not only for myself and others, start with the sources of support. And so these can be personal things, family, friends, the hobbies that we do, our faith, if that's important to you. And then again, on the personal level, being self-aware of what type of support we need to give ourselves and what type of support that we need from others. And so I am an extrovert, fully admit, living with an introvert. And it's really important that we're aware of that, because what my husband needs to support himself is different than what I need to support myself. And so whereas he might need some time and space alone to write, I need to be with people. And we were talking earlier, and we can mention this a little later, about a Zoom call that I have every day. I need to get with my family. I need to be with friends and colleagues and really feel that support. I will add that right now, with all the Zoom calls that we're doing, there is a very important acknowledgement of some of the cognitive dissonance that creates, that feeling like we're together with people and not really being together with people is exhausting for us. And so even though I'm an extrovert, spending a lot of time on Zoom with people is actually still exhausting for me, because my brain is trying to translate that of feeling like I'm with people, but not really feeling like I'm with people. And so just be aware that if you're on Zoom calls a lot these days, or any other platform, and you're feeling exhausted afterwards, that's real in a lot of different ways. Professional sources of support. Obviously, there's lots of options here, from personal therapists and professional counselors. Many of us are offering telehealth options right now, to mentorship programs. I'm really grateful to be in our Great Lakes region of the American Music Therapy Association, and we have a free mentorship program that's available to our members. Coaching, supervision. I know I do a lot of supervision for students and professionals, and I'm grateful I'm part of a peer supervision group so that I can get some supervision myself. And lots of online options for this too, similar to what you offer, Ryan, and others do as well. And then I am a music therapist, so I had to put music on here. And so music, whether we're creating it or listening to it, we know is incredibly powerful for our brains and incredibly powerful for our bodies. We know that our bodies are built on rhythm. And so we respond to the music around us. Our blood pressure, our heart rate, our breathing want to match the music around us. And so we can use that. And we can use that for our energy level. We can use that for our mood, to notice where they're at now. And the music therapists follow what we call the ISO principle. So noticing where we're at now and where we want to go with that. So if we're feeling pretty calm and we want to stay there, choosing music that helps us stay there. If we are tired and we need to get motivated, starting with music that's more relaxed and low key, and then upping the energy level can be really powerful and can help with that. The same is true with mood. It's important when we're sad to be sad. And so playing the music that allows you to experience that, whether you're creating the music yourself or listening to it, and then making sure we don't get stuck there. So maybe starting to up the hope level in the music that we listen to. So those are a few of our favorites. Those are a few that I found really powerful and helpful for the people that I've worked with over the years, and wanted to share with all y'all today too.
Well, that's good. I have to ask, we're coming up on our 30 minutes and I don't have to stop, but do you care?
I'm good.
All right. Well, we're going to keep going. So if you're watching, honestly, I think the topic is important, and there's lots of things to ask about this. I want to follow up on your 6 breaths thing.
Yeah.
6 deep breaths.
Yeah.
So is it, I guess this is probably my data science mind coming into here. Is it just because it takes you 30 seconds to do 6 breaths and that's like enough time to calm yourself down? Like, what is it about? Is it a 6, or is it just that's what they tried enough times? Why 6?
I would have to go back and find the exact study to tell you for sure why the number 6 hits. I've also seen studies that we need 10 a day to be healthy for our lungs as well as for the rest of ourselves. I do know that the piece with the deep breathing that's important is when we are taking these deep breaths. So breathing through our nose is one of the ways that we can do this, as well as those extended exhales, the longer exhales, will actually engage the parasympathetic nervous system. So what's happening as we take those 6 deep breaths is that we're actually engaging the parasympathetic nervous system, which helps our body to relax. And I will
Right.
say though, a lot of the work that I do is built around those of us who have experienced trauma in our lives. And one of the things that happens with trauma and is experiencing, more people are experiencing right now with COVID-19, is some of those regular rhythms get off because of trauma. We end up living in this state of fight or flight. And it's harder to allow our bodies to engage that parasympathetic nervous system. That becomes more challenging. Some of this breath work and some of these meditation practices are one of the ways that we can actually help our bodies to start to find that again, particularly during these times of more trauma and stress.
Right. So that there is actually some physiological backing to
Yes.
what's going on there.
Yeah. And as I said, all of these areas, there's a ton. What I've done, and specifically over the last year, is collated a lot of the research and put it together. And so I have lists and lists and lists of research. If people are interested in specific areas that you want to dive deeper on, I'm always glad to share those references too.
Yeah. All right. So if you just happen to be joining us, a few people have joined us on LinkedIn and YouTube. We're talking with Jennifer Hicks about self-care and why it's important all the time, and especially right now during our COVID-19 quarantine. My next question in here is, what are some types of fun activities? And maybe they don't necessarily all even have to be fun. What are some activities people can be doing right now? Well, everything, there are good things for us that just don't happen to be fun. And we
True.
still do them. So I guess I maybe should have left the word fun out of there. But what are some activities that we can be doing right now that are going to help us feel better and maybe try to bring a little bit of normalcy back into our lives?
Absolutely. And I would say that there's those two pieces of this. So there is the piece with my philosophy on these small sips, right? To find the little things that you can do right now that fit into your life, in your schedule, that'll work for you. And so that's a whole piece. And again, it might all be fun stuff. Having a regular sleep routine is not always fun, but it's kind of important.
Not always.
And so I would encourage you, though, to look for what's going to work in your life right now, with your family, whatever that looks like. If that's you, if it's you and your dog, if it's you and your wife and 5 kids and the fish, whatever that means. And so some fun ones that we can add on top of that when I think about the physical piece of it is Debbie Allen right now on Instagram does a dance class at 3:00 every Wednesday. And the Rockettes do one on Fridays. And there's all these resources that are now open for free yoga and free this type of exercise and that type of exercise. And so depending on what's fun for you, try some of these out. We've been having a blast Zooming as we try and follow Debbie Allen's dance class together as a family.
I've witnessed some of that, yes.
Yeah. This week we had my legs pictured on Zoom atop your daughter's body or below your daughter. Yeah.
I did see that as well. Hold back on it. So Zoom split screens everything, and there was a screenshot someone in my family took, and on the bottom of the screen, it was the bottom half of Jenny's body, and the top half was my daughter, and it almost lined up perfectly, like it looked as if it was one person.
Those paper dolls we used to have. And so that's great on a variety of levels, right? Because that's hitting the physical piece. I'm getting the endorphins of exercising. And I actually do break a sweat when I do that. I'm getting the mindfulness piece of positivity and gratitude and just being present in the moment. I'm also getting the sources of support that we talked about in doing that, not only on my own, but also with my niece and with my parents and my sisters and whoever else pops on. I have a colleague of mine who I know also has been doing that. And so we tweet about it. And so it's hitting all of those different ways. Plus she adds the music in. And so right there in one thing, I have managed to hit all of those 4 different elements of self-care. And that's one that I've intentionally put into my calendar now. So when I'm planning my new routine in this era of COVID, I don't plan other things for 3:00 Central Time on Wednesdays. That is my dance class time. And I honor that because that's an important part of my new routine. We were also talking earlier, our family has daily Zoom calls that we do together. And those have looked really different on different days. And yet it's become a really important check-in. And one of the things that I've liked about those is we do create the space in those calls to talk about the tough stuff too, that this isn't always easy, to have the support that we need, to be able to share those together. And then just to be a part of each other's lives, to have some of that consistent support every day. And that doesn't have to be a Zoom call. That could be a text check-in with somebody, especially if you have people in your life that maybe don't have other people around them to check in on them right now. That can be really critical. And so I'd encourage you to just be mindful of that. If you're struggling, to not be afraid to reach out. You are not alone in that. There's a lot of people struggling right now. And so some of those fun things can also be really critical ways that we're being mindful of our self-care too.
Yeah, I've heard a number of people share the tip of just looking through your phone text messages and pick somebody that you haven't sent a message to in 3 months, 6 months, a year, and just send them a message and ask how they're doing and how life is, just to make a little bit of a connection, make somebody feel a little bit better. It helps you feel a little bit better. It builds a little bit of connection.
Absolutely.
So
One of
that's
my
a good
favorite
one.
ways to do is to add in that gratitude piece to that too then. And so when you're messaging them, specifically tell them one thing that you are grateful about for them. So, I am grateful for the way that, you and my sister have modeled building a family and a life together over the years in a way that is consistent with what works for your family. And I'm grateful for the way that you treat each of your kids like the unique, incredible people that they are. That's such a wonderful model of parenting. And there's all these specific things that when I look at you, I can say, oh, I'm grateful for this. And so when you're messaging people to say, I thought of you today. I'm really grateful that you do this and just wanted to check in and see how you are. Because again, then you're also sharing the benefits of gratitude with them. Most of us like to be told thank you. Most of us like to be told nice things about ourselves. Again, with that self-compassion, we don't often talk that way to ourselves. And so making the time to share some of those positive messages with each other and creating the space to just check in. How are you? How's it going? Absolutely. That's a great way to reach out.
That's a great tip there to add that gratitude piece. And honestly, it's one of those things I'm not real great at. And so that's good. Anyhow, getting some great tips on self-care with Jennifer Hicks today. I got a couple more questions here. Are there good resources and potentially even apps to help people deal with the 4 elements you're talking about, or anything in general? What's out there for this?
There are so many resources out there for this. It is actually almost overwhelming right now how many resources we have out there for this. And so I would just mention a couple. I'll go back and mention Olga Phoenix again, just as a reference for the self-care wheel and the resiliency wheel that she just came out with. I will mention, when I'm looking at resources, some of the options for health, that physical piece, are really important. And there's a lot of those right now. And so from the apps that you can have on your device to help monitor your sleep and monitor your health, to ways that you can track what you're eating, if you choose to do that right now. We have a rule in our house. My husband, who's an incredible chef and baker, can only bake 1 dessert a day. That is our rule.
I heard he was going a little bit crazy at the beginning of quarantine time.
Oh, I am blessed and grateful, and very full. But there are apps that can do all of those things. There are great apps that can give you those reminders, and you can do this. Part of the way I'm not giving too many specifics is because it depends on, if you tend to be I'm a Mac girl, I'm an Apple girl, married to a non-Apple guy. And so depending on your platform, there's different apps for different things. But there's lots of ways that you can also set reminders for yourself. One of the things that I do when I present on self-care is I offer a follow-up option. I encourage people to create a SMART goal. And so choosing something that is actually measurable that they're going to do, and then holding them accountable so for the people that I've presented with in the past, I actually do follow-up emails and calls to say, hey, how's that going? And just check in with them, because being accountable for some of these things can help. And so whether that's on your phone, having a reminder that comes up, once a day. I actually have it in my Todoist app, once a day to be grateful, and once a day to pause and breathe. And those are regular reminders that I get, just like I get with any other piece of my schedule. And there's also great, calm apps and meditation apps that are out there. I'm also a fan of books. If you have children, young children, especially at home, this is one of my favorites, Breathe Like a Bear. We'll see if we can get the author there too.
Nice.
Yeah. This is where the hot chocolate breath came from, that I love. So this is by Kira
Right.
Wiley, and has some really fun, different type of breathing patterns and meditation patterns to connect with kids who might be struggling right now. Yoga Calm is another resource that was developed by a yoga teacher and a social worker in the schools that is specifically designed for kids. There's also a lot of great apps out there. Oh, goodness. On all of these different levels. Music stuff, there's tons right now. If you haven't seen all the free music out there, there's a bunch. The Google Chrome Music Lab is a favorite of mine to explore and play around with if you like to create music and explore that with your kids, or even as an adult. There are so many resources. I would just encourage you to use the power of the Google and to do some searching. And also, I'll just invite you to reach out. If there's a specific something that you're looking for that you haven't found that you think would be helpful, feel free to reach out to me, and I'm glad to share the resources that I found helpful for with you too.
All right. On that note, what is the best way to reach out to you if someone wants to find out more, ask some questions, just learn more about you? Where should they go?
All right. So my website is www.joyfulnoisesllc.com. And that has not only information about me, some free slides and handouts from presentations that I've done. It also has the links to publications I've written, and it has a contact form. And so you can contact me directly through the website. I'm also on LinkedIn and YouTube and Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. My professional accounts are under Joyful Noises LLC. And then Jennifer Hicks. My personal accounts for many things are under Jen R. Hicks, Hicks. So feel free to reach out to me. Last one I'll give you is the email address. If you'd like to directly email me is jhicks@joyfulnoisesllc.com. And I'm always glad to connect and share ideas and share resources and learn too. It's part of why I love doing this, is because I'm always learning new ideas and things that people find helpful, and adding those to my tips and tricks as well.
All right. Well, I got one final question. This has been really good so far. So thanks for taking the time to do this. My last question is, it's a Friday afternoon. Lots of people are getting ready for a weekend. And honestly, I know weekends nowadays feel less different than weekdays for many people, but they are a little bit different. But